Ja, hejsan, Östen Rönne här. Det här är då, jag vill göra då till den här videon ett kort intro av vissa skäl, kan man säga. Det här är en video som kommer visas med på ganska exakt en timme, lite drygt en timme, men och det är en bra kanal tycker jag. Det är en kille som heter Seth Holehouse som har en kanal som heter Man in America. Han har gjort väldigt mycket bra videos och intervjuer. Som några av dem så har jag delat också. Med svensk text försöker jag göra. Så också den här videon då. Och han har intervjuat här då en kvinna som kallar sig för Mel K. Och har skrivit då lite omskriven skulle jag tro att hon är. Jag har faktiskt inte hört talas om henne tidigare. Man kan inte veta och kunna allt. Men hon har gett ut en bok då nyligen då, som heter, översatt fritt till svenska då, Infiltration istället för invasion. Göra bort med det. Men infiltration istället för invasion, översatt till svenska. Jag tror inte den finns på svenska, utan den finns nog i sådana fall på Amazon eller något liknande. Men det var en bra intervju och det var intressant att säga lite grann hur maktimperiet och ekonomiska byggdes upp då från runt andra världskriget. Och när jag har researchat riktigt bra och väldigt mycket. Och därför tyckte jag att det här var det var en bra injektion även för mig då. Att ta del av det man har att säga. Intressant på många sätt. Men nu kommer mitt lilla aber här då, om man säger så då, som gör att jag väljer att lägga ett intro här. Jag skulle uppskatta om ni där ute för det första tittar på hela den här videon. Det tar 1 timme. Men också lägger kommentarer till vad tyckte ni om den? Och i sådana fall, varför tyckte ni som ni tyckte? Gärna. Skulle vara intressant för mig att veta då. För jag kommer nämligen att komma med en uppfattning. Jag kommer saluföra en uppfattning om cirka några dagar, kanske en vecka. Om vad jag tyckte om den här intervjun med henne. Som var väldigt intressant på många sätt och vis. Men då kommer jag att säga vad jag anser då totalt sett då, tutti om den här intervjun. Så därför gör jag det här introt. Att jag skulle uppskatta om ni som har möjlighet att skriva i kommentarsfältet på mina kanaler. Gör det, vad ni tyckte om det här och varför ni tyckte så, och gärna, egentligen vad som helst. Det får vara hur mycket som helst, tycker jag, i min värld. Ja, det var det jag hade att säga. Och därmed så kommer då den här intervjun som egentligen är Seth Holehouse ställer inte så många frågor, utan hon är väldigt talför, den här kvinnan då som kallar sig för Mel K. Och så det är mest hon som pratar, vilket faktiskt är lite intressant på många sätt och vis. Det kommer här i alla fall. Hej!
Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holehouse. Most people, when they trace back the threats that we're facing today, the surveillance, the control grabs, the slow collapse, the things that we were told would always be there, they go to COVID, maybe 9/11, at the furthest, maybe the Cold War. But that's kind of where most people land. But I've been studying this stuff for quite some time, and I keep arriving at the same window in history, one that most Americans oftentimes just walk right past. And once you see it, it changes everything about how you frame what's happening in the world today, especially in America. So it's the late 1940s. World War II just ended. Our boys were home. We were celebrating, GI Bill, suburbs growing, parades everywhere. And right there, while the confetti was still on the ground, a completely different kind of war was being waged. Not with bombs or armies, but with institutions, with money, with quiet agreements between people whose names we were just never told. The infiltration of America didn't look like an invasion, and that's the whole point. It wasn't supposed to. And so my guest today is Mel K. Mel has spent years pulling on the threads that most historians are either too afraid of or too conditioned or maybe just too controlled to touch. So she's traced the whole network of foundations, intelligence cutouts, globalist organizations that are built right after World War II to reshape America from the inside out. So her new book is called Infiltration Instead of Invasion, America Betrayed 1944 to 1954. When I sat down with her, she walked me through the connections that I had not fully put together myself, and I've been doing this for quite some time. So in today's conversation, we get into how the post-war era was used to build this supranational infrastructure that we're living under right now, who the key players were, and how the Great Reset, the pandemic response, and the full track and trace surveillance build out all trace back to decisions that were made in this hidden decade. So it's not a doom and gloom conversation. As usual, we get into some dark places, but Mel brings real clarity and actually a lot of hope about the fight that's happening right now to pull these tentacles out. So if this conversation gives you value, the single best thing you can do right now is just hit that like button, whether it's YouTube or Rumble. I know it sounds like a small thing, but it genuinely makes a huge difference for getting this content in front of more people, way more than just subscribing or following. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leaving a written review does the same thing there. It really helps move the needle in the algorithm more than anything else. So if you want to help this reach the people who need to hear it, that's how you can help. Also, send this just to one person in your life who keeps saying something's going on but can't quite name it, because maybe this episode or some of the others just might name it for them. All right, let's go ahead and dive into this interview with Mel K. Mel K, it's great to have you back on the show. It feels like it's been way too long since we last did a show together, but thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me. And it has been long, but there's so much going on. You really don't know where to focus. I know you're doing things and I'm doing things, and our whole goal together is empowering people with information to empower themselves. So it's busy time for that. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. I think that one of the things that we're focusing on today is, I would say, the history of how America was taken over. And I guess this is a key point. And obviously there's multiple stages of that process. But if you look around at America today, it's not the America that our founders established that set out for. I mean, it has drastically gone off course. And I think that our freedoms are a fraction of what the Constitution originally had intended for us. And so I know that you recently have just launched a book for pre-release, which we'll be kind of talking about, but you're someone that has a huge wealth of knowledge from research, and you're really a researcher, but you've gone in and identified a particular decade or so where a lot of the America we see now came from these hidden rooms and hidden discussions that were happening over 50, 60 years ago. And so I guess I'll just let you start wherever you want to start on this journey together.
Well, okay, great. I think it's important for people to first remember that America is about the people of this country. And we have been living under kind of, like you're saying, we've slowly but surely had our liberty and our entire, founding doctrine chipped away at. And I think a lot of people know that. They know that it's happening, but they don't really know how it's happening or why it's happening or where the changes are, because they're gradual. This is the whole point of where we are right now, was that people wouldn't see the slow burn of the Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and everything kind of getting thrown aside for something different. And I think now most people see it. I think COVID really was a game changer, that I call it the pandemic, but people started looking at the coordination on a global scale for the first time, other than those that thought that it was a conspiracy or a conspiracy theory. They started to realize, well, no, it can't be that, because they're doing this in all over the world at the exact same time with the exact same people in charge, and it's global. And I think that we have to understand that the people that created the system that has usurped, I believe, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and our freedom and liberty, and a lot more, built their system before the end of World War II. And a lot of things that happened in that period, my book is called Infiltration Instead of Invasion, America Betrayed, 1944 to 1954, because those years were the years of the GI Bill and of celebrating the Allies and, parades everywhere in America. And now, suburbs are growing all over. So in America, it was a time of celebration very much for the people of this country. But what was also happening at the same time was that an international architecture had already been built before the end of the war, before Hitler surrendered. And this was not just with Nazis. This involved New York bankers from Wall Street, very involved, the Bank of International Settlements, the Rockefeller family, and Standard Oil. A lot of these different groups are multinational corporations, and they already were in World War II. IG Farben, same thing. So a lot of this comes from that. I believe that two Wall Street lawyers from Sullivan and Cromwell, known as the Dulles brothers, were over there in Switzerland, in France, in Europe during the war, planning the post-war financial system that is above all nations. And I believe after World War II, something terrible happened to our country, similar to what happened when they allowed in the Federal Reserve to infiltrate our entire system here, was that the Dulles brothers came back and reconfigured the State Department into a tentacle of the supranational, as they called it themselves, architecture of continuity. And at that time, also, as you know, Alan Dulles, also a longtime chair of the Council of Foreign Relations, which, of course, worked with Chatham House all these years to kind of keep the idea that even though America fought for its independence, that somehow we are still inextricably linked to Europe. And the Chatham House and the Council of Foreign Relations are one and the same, essentially, just like Bilderberg. I call them Atlanticists. They're people that consider the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the war for our revolution were kind of bumps in the road, not necessarily divisions for real, but we the people think that we won our independence in America in 1776. But I feel that the people that run the international banking system, particularly that created the Bank of International Settlements, never looked at it that way, and that to them, nothing was more important as our people were dying, fighting for Europe, even before D-Day. The Dulles brothers and the bankers from the City of London, the Bank of England, the bankers from Hitler's Germany, the Reich Bank, bankers from France and from different places that were all part of creating the Bank of International Settlements, continued working as if there was not a war happening. So when you kind of understand that a lot of the countries, particularly there's big examples, but a lot of the countries like Czechoslovakia and Hungary and all of these places that were looted, their entire banks were looted, all the gold was looted, all of that. Well, in the bankers' eyes, that wasn't relevant, that there was a war. They needed to keep the money moving. Most of that money moved into the Bank of International Settlements. And what the American people were never told was that it was a American in New York banker that was running the Bank of International Settlements while our soldiers were fighting and dying on the continent of Europe. They were in Switzerland acting as if nothing had changed, investing money for the Reich, investing money for America, investing money for London, for everywhere. And that was the point. They felt that, and this is the whole idea that they talk about now with the Federal Reserve is somehow, not political, because they don't care about nation states. So, we talked a lot, me and you in the past, about Agenda 2030 and that it's a nation state ending agenda. Well, this nation state ending agenda goes back to before the First World War. And frankly, the League of Nations after the First World War was the first attempt at a global governance model. And it was very explicit that it was a global governance model. The Second World War, during the Reconstruction, is when a lot of this happened, and they put in the UN, which wasn't explicitly a global governance model, but it was, and it certainly was helpful. So what I see about this period of time that's very important for people to understand is that the bankers on Wall Street, particularly JP Morgan, there's also the Bank of Chicago. There was also Sullivan and Cromwell, the law firm where the Dulles brothers came from. They already had multinational corporations. A lot of us learned about that maybe with the global public-private partnership and all that. But IG Farben and Rockefeller Standard Oil, IG Farben being the pharmaceutical firm, which is also has always been part of the military-industrial complex. This isn't new with COVID. It's always been that the pharmaceutical companies are inextricably connected to the military-industrial complex. They were already working together. They were already working together on multi-continents. It was Sullivan and Cromwell, actually, John Foster Dulles, who was creating these international legal frameworks for multinational corporations to function in America and in Germany and in England and anywhere else in the world above nations. So a lot of this stuff that we're dealing with now and facing as we fight the battle against the destruction of sovereign nations for this global governance technocracy model, remember that it was built long ago, and that after World War II, I don't think our country, at least the State Department, the CIA, National Endowment for Democracy, and USAID have been tentacles of the supranational architecture and not working for the United States of America.
Okay, so a lot to unpack there. And basically, you mentioned this kind of hidden thing. It reminds me of just silent weapons for quiet wars,
Yes.
which was interesting because I was just covering the hantavirus, and there was this X-Files clip where they're talking about hantavirus being created by a military lab to then unleash on the human population. And in this clip, he referred to it as a silent weapon for a quiet war, which I thought was just kind of, of my goodness. But so basically, I'm going to kind of hone in on some of the things that you talked about there. Here's the hard truth. Every 6 years, your dollar loses half its buying power. That means a $100,000 savings account today could feel like $50,000 by 2031. And you see it every time you fill up your tank, buy groceries, or pay the bills. Prices are up. Your dollar's down. But there's a simple way to protect the value of your savings with something real, something proven: gold. An asset that holds its value over time. And that's why I trust Noble Gold Investments. They make it simple to protect your savings with physical gold or silver. No high-pressure sales, no call centers, just honest guidance, one-on-one support, and transparent pricing. And right now, when you open a qualified account, Noble Gold will send you a free 10-ounce silver American flag bar as a thank you. So head over to goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 today to learn more. Again, that's goldwithseth.com or 626-654-1906. Don't just protect your wealth, preserve its power. We know that, by and large, the wars are bankers' wars, right? That these wars, and again, if you look at even Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, the book, they talk very explicitly about the role of a war and how wars function as these resets for them. They can redraw, boundaries of countries. They can reset financial systems. Not to mention the psychological toll on all the mothers losing their sons, the sons going off to fight in war, etc. And so, if you look at World War II, what basically kind of pulling together what you just kind of the framework that you put there, what I'm understanding is that World War II basically became this launch pad for this global corporatocracy, basically, where they had these giant corporations and banks, which, you think of kind of the power structure and you think that you have the military and the governments, but actually those are just puppets to layers above them. And of course, we know that the layers keep going up higher and higher, and you get into these very secret societies and small groups that have immense power. But these corporations that have this multinational presence, they're tied into the banks, they're tied into the military industrial complex. Think about Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Halliburton, for instance. They're not these big companies that are out there to make money like you think they are, right? There's something much deeper. And so in how you kind of laid out for us, am I correct in understanding that World War II became this perfect staging ground, this perfect opportunity to then create, or to not just create from anew, but really to cement this global corporate structure that was running countries and governments and armies? And I mean, is that a correct way of understanding what you've outlined for us?
Yeah, and I think it goes back. You're absolutely right about the book and mentioning that. And World War I, if you look back into the trigger of World War I, it's very sketchy, And what I've learned mostly is that the money is made in the reconstruction after the war, which is why I realize right now how badly the EU and NATO obviously wants to justify itself to continue to exist, which is why we've had nonstop wars, in my opinion, since 1993. But at the same time, we do have to look at the idea that reconstruction is what is the biggest moneymaker that has ever been after every war. The American people essentially paid for the entire reconstruction of Europe.
It's the Marshall Plan, is that right?
Right. And it's a total fraud. I mean, it's a total fraud on the American people. The American people did not know that, not to mention that then they were given all these special privileges. But it wasn't really what you're saying, what you took from what I was saying. It wasn't really about exactly. It wasn't, and all these things happen in this 10-year period that America is all euphoric about beating the Nazis and winning, and the expansion of university with the GI Bill to all these people that never would have gone to university, and the expansion of all kinds of different industries and Hollywood, and it was a big time of celebration. Well, they used that to launder trillions of, and at the time billions, now trillions of dollars of money under the guise of rebuilding a country that they destroyed. And don't forget, right at the end of World War II, they shift to the Cold War, and we are allies with Russia. And then all of a sudden, we're not allies with Russia, and Russia becomes the problem. And then this entire thing about hunting down communists become the thing. And the reason that I call it infiltration instead of invasion, and you've seen me speak on at many events, is I always start off with JFK's speech about a ruthless conspiracy. He calls it a monolithic conspiracy, where he says they have infiltration instead of invasion, subversion instead of elections, guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. Well, if JFK is saying that in 1961, I wanted to know exactly what he was talking about, because they were saying, when historians after the fact always say, oh, he's talking about communism. I don't think that now. I think he was talking about what I believe happened in Germany and in Switzerland during the war that the Dulles brothers helped create. And then, of course, the Reconstruction part with Bretton Woods. Don't forget, like, many things happened in that multi-year period, but they were also supposed to end the Bank of International Settlements, which was supposedly built for the money to reconstruct Europe after World War I. Well, they voted at Bretton Woods to end the Bank of International Settlements, and you know what happened? It didn't end, and it only got stronger, and it is still the strongest, most powerful bank in the world, and it is still to this day. Here's the craziest part about what Allen Dulles and his brother did. This is so crazy, people won't even believe it. And you can't hold it against us, because the Rockefellers controlled the history books, okay, 1,000%. And they were involved in every aspect. So there was an event in 44 before Hitler surrendered, where Himmler was there, and his banker Schreff, and Norman from the Bank of England, McKittrick, the American running the Bank of International Settlements, the Dulles brothers, the Rockefellers, IG executives, all these executives were there essentially, and all the bankers, and they were trying to figure out how to get the 60 million people that they looted and laundered and stole from. There's billions of dollars that needs to be funneled out of Germany before Hitler surrenders. It was they already knew that he was going to surrender by the time they created the post-war international supranational structure to get that money out of there. So what they were doing is they were transferring money from the Reich Bank into the Bank of International Settlements. And then, as a lot of people know, Chuck Grassley and Mel K have reopened the rat line investigation of where the money was going. And it turns out that a lot more was being funneled out. But it wasn't just being funneled through banks in Italy and Argentina and into America. It was being funneled into shell companies and also subsidiaries of the corporations that were already in existence. So, IG Farben gets broken up into Bayer, BASF, but then their headquarters in America. They're opening headquarters in Mexico. They're opening headquarters in South America. A lot of this was about getting that money out. And I mean, this goes to Volkswagen, Krupp, Daimler, Mercedes, like all of these companies, all of their executives, and people shouldn't forget when we think about IG Farben, is that they were charged in Nuremberg because IG Farben had made a deal with the Rockefellers, the Standard Oil of New Jersey, and IG Farben had a sharing relationship about patents and all kinds of things. That this was the multinational thing. What we do know is that the IG Farben also had off of Auschwitz their own camp where they made the Zyklon B that was used to kill in the gas chambers. They worked 60,000 people to death in the IG Farben camp that was at Auschwitz to make their own poison to kill the rest of them. So, I mean, 10 people were tried from IG Farben at Nuremberg. Now, the scary part about that is that Alan Dulles and another American, McCloy, they came in and they got all these people out. So the IG Farben executives maybe served 1-2 years, and then many of them came to America. And don't forget that this is separate from Operation Paperclip, where, Annie Jacobson wrote the best book about that. But now we're finding out it wasn't just 1,600 scientists. It was about 12,000 high level, and we're talking in everything. We're talking in what they call civil society, but that's NGOs. And we know that Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Ford foundations were all investigated in the 30s for being subversive to the will of the American people. And here they are taking in the intellectuals and the organizers from Germany into their organizations in America and giving them new names and bringing their whole family and unfortunately bringing their entire ideology, which could be mistaken for anything, but it's totalitarianism. And they have strongholds, particularly in Northern California, obviously the Jet Propulsion Lab. We have, Huntsville with NASA. But we have all these different institutions that absorbed the intellectuals of the Nazi Party into their organizations on every level. So we're talking not just, shell companies or subsidiaries of multinational firms, but we're talking also they're absorbing them into the law firms, the global law firms. They're absorbing them into the global organizations. They're absorbing them into academia. I mean, so a lot has been hidden from us about that total shift from, I believe the long-term goal of the State Department at that point was global governance. And I think that they all basically answered to the Dulles brothers because the State Department became the tentacle of the global banking sector and the international corporations. But the CIA became the protector of that, not of this country. It is my firm belief that the CIA and MI6 were joined and created to protect the international, supranational architecture built by these people on the ending days of World War II, and that it still stands. And I frankly believe that World War III was planned before the end of World War II. And that is where we are now. So a lot of this to me came back to JFK's speech and what exactly was he talking about. And
actually,
that's why
I found a clip. I'll play it real quick. It's a minute long. I'm not sure. I didn't preview this, but let's go and play this because I think this is will probably be very telling considering what you just told us.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
It stopped there. So, I mean, it's kind of shocking hearing that now, given all that we know. I mean, it's like he's basically he's basically saying that our world is run by a secret network of powerful people who have control over almost everything that matters, institutions, intelligence, armies, etc., that have these covert hidden plans, and that is a monolithic conspiracy against the free people of the world. I mean, he basically summed it up, the deep state or the cabal or whatever you want to call it. So, I wonder what happened to him for talking about this kind of stuff, right?
Exactly. And anyone else that tried. And, it's interesting because I wrote the book as kind of a puzzle where I went through this speech piece by piece. And I looked at what was going on in the 50s and the 40s and the 30s that led him to say he said this was a speech in 1961 for all of the newspapers, all of the press. This was the press was going after him like they go after everyone. And he was saying, we are in clear and present danger. There is a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that has been built to basically enslave every man, woman, and child. And, this is how they do it. Infiltration instead of invasion, subversion instead of elections, guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. And I was pulling apart everything and being like, okay, what's this about? And remember, him and the Dulles brothers, particularly Alan Dulles, JFK fired Alan Dulles, okay? And Alan Dulles and his brother literally ran this country and, frankly, foreign policy and the tentacle of the captured global infrastructure in America between Alan's and their relationship with the Council of Foreign Relations, but also their very close relationship with the Rockefeller family, who still is not, you say something about them and people get confused. The Rockefeller family is not the same as the Rothschilds. That's not true, first of all. And second of all, their relationship with Nazi Germany is very well documented, and their relationship with I.G. Farben, but also their relationship with, rewriting history or writing history to begin with infiltrating medical schools, with infiltrating K through 12 schools. I mean, this was allowed to happen. And right out there, but we're being told that the Dulles brothers are heroes and the Rockefellers have done so much for this country and all of this. And now it's kind of like JFK was realizing, I think at that time, knowing all of what he was learning, he was realizing, no, these are not good people. These are people that have literally built an architecture to end the country as we knew it as a free constitutional republic. These people did not believe in a constitutional republic. In fact, David Rockefeller said it himself. He said a country that's run by intellectuals and bankers is preferable to anything that was done prior. Like these guys talked about it openly in their own meetings, but we didn't know about that. So, I think we have to understand that this grew and grew. And again, another person that needs to be looked at is Prescott Bush, because a lot of people don't know that he was actually almost charged with treason This is George H.W. Bush's father. Was almost charged for treason for doing banking with Nazi bankers during the war. Well, he was also working with the Dulles brothers, and he was also working with the Rockefellers. I mean, Wall Street was very much involved. And I think that we have to realize that today we have a different model, but nobody can deny that BlackRock and Vanguard are certainly functioning above our country still. Nobody can deny that the endless war for profit model has not stopped, yet where has anything gotten better? It really is about endless war for profit, and the idea that these people, particularly with the IMF and the World Bank and all of that these people have been spending the last 50 years trying to save the planet and, vaccinate people to health and, fight these battles to save democracies is essentially a lie. It's a money laundering lie.
Wow. So basically, so obviously Rockefeller is very central to this, and I have a few questions about that, but just to make sure that kind of the image I'm building in my head is matching, it's almost as if what World War II was this opportunity to, in essence, redistribute wealth, knowledge, skill, everything globally, right? With a lot of it, because I know that what World War II did is it really established America as the unipolar leader of the free world, right? And a lot of it was, to oppose tyranny, to oppose communism, all these different things. But fundamentally, it was almost as if they looked at America and said, okay, hey, if this is the chessboard they're controlling, they say, okay, we're going to make America the king, and we're going to align all the things around it to protect America and to use America as this major mechanism for global control until it was no longer needed, until it got in the way, right? And so that World War II became this really easy way to loot all of these countries, to loot the immense wealth of Europe, which that wealth goes back thousands of years. And to basically loot all this wealth, to kind of suck it up into these global banking systems, these global corporations, to take all of the top talent and minds of all the different areas across Europe, suck them up, and then in this global kind of apparatus where they then get kind of pushed down into America to then build up America as the central global power unit they could use to control the world until they were ready to then shift that system over to Asia and China, which that's kind of what I've pieced together, is that was the plan, was to then kind of use America until it was sucked dry and then transfer that power over to China, to use China as kind of the future kind of unipolar center. So would you say that that's an accurate understanding?
Yeah, I would. And I would also say there was a couple meetings that happened. Even, we weren't even at D-Day when they met in Bretton Woods in North New Hampshire. I mean, there was all the bankers in the world acting as if, okay, what are we going to do with all the money when it's over? And they create the IMF and the World Bank. Well, we know now the World Bank is essentially a black hole for globalism. And the IMF has gone around the world giving out loans people can't pay and then taking over the banking system and the natural resources of countries all over the world, including Ukraine. And a lot of this does also connect to Ukraine, because what people don't know is that the headquarters essentially of the SS during World War II, I mean, the worst of the worst evil, was in Ukraine. Okay. And the Ukrainian Nazis never were held accountable. They didn't go to Nuremberg. They didn't do that. And the person that facilitated that in my research is Alan Dulles. And I don't fully know why, but I do know that they started immediately after Hitler surrendered, planning to rebuild Europe's military, just like they were not going to do that after World War I. Next thing you know, Germany has the strongest military in the world. Well, after World War II, they weren't going to do that. And then suddenly, no, they had already made plans before the end of the war to rebuild the military and in Germany. And the big thing that they were saying at the Red House meeting, which is the one where they talked about how to get the money out of the country with shell companies and international subsidiaries. At that meeting already, they were talking about they can let the Nazis fall, but Germany must not. So, so there's a show going on. And think about all the propaganda for decades that still goes on. So the idea, that's why people get upset when I say the Nazis didn't lose. Maybe the SS or the goose-stepping green, uniform wearing, following Hitler Nazis might have fallen. But the ideology is totalitarianism, period. And that did not die with World War II and supposedly Hitler, though I don't think Hitler died then. And we know now, if your audience knows, but Chuck Grassley and Mel are right now in the middle of uncovering a lot of things that were not uncovered or exposed in Switzerland after the war, or even to this day. They have found by now 900 more bank accounts that are called Nazi rat lines, most of them going somewhere between, the Vatican, Argentina, and don't forget, when all the Nazis were escaping to Argentina, including Eichmann and Mengele and many others, Francis, the former pope, was the head of the archdiocese in Argentina. So, and the archdiocese, and you know who else was very involved? The Red Cross was helping a lot of these Nazis get out, get new names, new bank accounts, new passports, and finding places for them in the multinational corporations or in the institutions in America. And so the Red Cross and the Catholic Church was very involved in this transfer of essentially brain power of totalitarianism. The people that put it together, the people that put together propaganda that made a whole country kind of brainwashed. So a lot of this stuff, we see it now. And that's why when COVID started, I had already done about 20 years ago, I wrote a screenplay about Eichmann in Jerusalem and Hannah Arendt. And I had known that from that book and other things that I studied for that project, that they had first started moving Jews and gypsies and mentally handicapped people and all that into ghettos, they called them, because of typhus, the virus typhus. That's how they started it. And most people don't realize that Auschwitz was being told that it was a quarantine camp. And they were being told that they were going into the showers to be de-liced from typhus. So when I'm watching this thing and I'm thinking, oh my God, they're playing it's the same playbook. And then we're seeing the othering of anyone that questioned it. The othering, these are totalitarian, just principles. This is the origins, as Hannah Arendt wrote, of totalitarianism. And she wrote that book to warn the future generations of what it looks like. And if you pick up her book, of totalitarianism now, we are in a very dangerous place, particularly in America, because we are the problem now for this globalist architecture. They shine the light on themselves. They made a lot of mistakes with COVID, and I frankly believe they made a lot of mistakes when Donald Trump won and surprised them, because it is my belief that, and this is another level, like I said, that George H.W. Bush, that his father and the Dulles brothers and probably many other people in our government actually aligned with the Nazis and aligned with their vision of a one Europe with no Russia and running the world on a global scale, using America as the might and the money. But the money still is there. Now, one thing I do want to tell your audience, because this is something we can do now, and it's really important that people understand how betrayed we have been on this level. So in 1945, and this was Truman too, but the Dulles brothers were behind it, particularly John Foster Dulles. They gave the Bank of International Settlements and 63 banks connected to it, and the United Nations that was just starting, and 76 tentacles of the United Nations immunity. And that immunity also exists on our soil. The IMF, the World Bank, any of these organizations on U.S. soil are completely immune and not under jurisdiction of the United States at all to this day. And that is a terrifying thing. Many of these immunity, first of all, they cannot be audited, they cannot be legally sued, they cannot be investigated, you cannot enter their premises without permission from the organization in the United States of America. And many of these immune agencies that run the international globalist architecture are in New York City. They're in Washington, D.C. And they are not American institutions. And the American legal system can do nothing. They can't even investigate them in America. That is how it's been running, in my opinion.
Unfortunately, it just makes sense. But I want to hone back in on Rockefeller, right? So you said one thing, that the Rockefeller is not the Rothschilds, right? They're very different. So
Right.
I'd love to see where you make that distinction, because I think they get grouped in together as like, oh, they're just the bloodline families,
Yeah.
and they kind of run everything together. So I'd love to see how you see those interacting, those two family lines, but also then looking at the role that the Rockefellers specifically have played in the engineering of modern America. So I'll let you just kind of address those in whatever way makes sense to you.
So World War I, they create the Bank of International Settlements to kind of pay for the reconstruction. And there was a Dawes Plan, Young Plan. There were many people debating it. Now, one of the men that created it was this, what was his name? Dexter White, Harry Dexter White. Okay, well, he's one of the guys that was involved. He was involved in Bretton Woods and all of that. Well, it turns out years later in the Verona papers, which were released in the 70s about Soviet spies in America, that this Harry Dexter White was a Soviet spy that created this banking system. He was one of them, but he was the American representative that helped create this BIS and Bretton Woods and IMF, and all this was actually a Soviet spy. Now, that's debated, but there are documents. I have them in the book that you can see. But what happened was the Bank of International Settlements was a conglomerate of the banks of the world. So at that time, of course, the Rothschilds banks are essentially in the city of London, but they also have their bank in Frankfurt. I think they have a bank in Austria, one in France, but it's all the same family. But their main hub is the city of London. But that's that. Now, the partners at the time, at this time, the people of the United States of America did not want to be part of this. So instead of it being our Federal Reserve that was the partner of the Bank of International Settlements, it was JP Morgan, which is the Rockefellers Bank. So who was meeting in Nazi Germany to build the Second World War coffers are the banks of New York. It would be the Bank of New York, the Bank of Chicago, and JP Morgan were representing the United States of America, private commercial banks, in the creation of the Bank of International Settlements. And then what happened? So all the other banks that were there, from France, from Germany, from England, were Rothschild banks. But the American bankers were essentially the Rockefeller bankers. So that's where a lot of people look at it and they say, it's just that it was a conglomerate, I believe, of 12 bankers. And on that Bank of International Settlements was also Hitler's banker. You know, the Nazi banker was also on the board there and regularly met there. Alan Dulles lived there. The OSS was there. That's in Bern, Switzerland. And all of this was going on as people were, as men were dying, in hundreds of thousands of men, and 60 million people are having their lives destroyed while these guys are in Bern, Switzerland, planning essentially the post-war order, which is a world-controlled, managed technocracy by them with their numbers. So that's why I say, and then again, like I said before, the IG Farben and Standard Oil of New Jersey were essentially partners in Nazi Germany and in America. So that is also the Rockefellers. So I think a lot of people talk about the Rockefeller family and the Rothschilds being one and the same. I think they're more like the Rothschilds are the European group, where the Rockefellers are the American group. And that is what they were on the Bank of International Settlements, until the Bank of International Settlements at point had the Federal Reserve, and this was all the way in the 90s, I believe. The Federal Reserve then bought all the shares from the JP Morgan Chase, the bank that originally ran it, and they bought it. So now the Federal Reserve is part of it. But when they were first proposing it, it was the American people that did not want to be part of an international banking system. So instead, with the Wall Street bankers and the Dulles brothers and everyone, they said, give it to JP Morgan, and when we can, we'll figure this out. But in the meantime, those are the spokespeople for the international, supranational architecture in Bern, Switzerland, and Basel, Switzerland, and that's where it's been since. And they've never, at the Bretton Woods conference, everyone agreed that there was no reason to keep the Bank of International Settlements going. And when they left there, nobody stopped it. And it never ended to this day. And Switzerland has no jurisdiction over it either. The craziest part about the Bank of International Settlements, no one does. And I mean, like, you can't, it's way beyond diplomatic immunity, what that bank has, and all the banks connected to it, and also the UN. And frankly, that's how they infiltrated our country. And then if you have a deal, right? So Bill and Melinda Gates, what do they have? Gavi. So Gavi gets extended immunity because they have a deal with the United Nations. And it just spreads out. And what it looks like to me when I put it all together on the wall, you know, putting it like a detective, is that there is giant architecture that is very identifiable above all of our countries. And Donald Trump was not going to continue down that path in 2016. And he was going to normalize relations, I believe, with Russia. And that just did not fit into the plan. And I think that the global coup in 2016 against Donald Trump was because they had already planned Ukraine for a third war to try to finally get rid of Russia and then spread out Russia's natural resources, finally unite Europe as a totalitarian controlled place to usher in the reconstruction of World War III Agenda 2030. I mean, I think that it's that much of a plan that was planned out and that Donald Trump got in the way of. And that's why we have been in a color revolution for now, you know, since 2016, because they had to use the CIA and the operations that they used all over Europe to get people in line to join the EU and to give up their sovereignty, 27 nations. They had to get us there. And that is exactly what we're fighting right now. And if you look at the midterms, they're not ushering in Democrats. They're ushering in globalists. I mean, Barack Obama and Alex Soros and Uma Abedin just went to a globalist conference in Canada last week and talked about the future of globalism and waiting out Trump. And I'm telling you, that Obama Center in Chicago, the hub of all of this, and Obama is the next phase of globalism on the soil of the United States of America. And I am telling you, they have a young global leaders for 4 years while we had an auto pen. Valerie Jarrett was essentially running a young global leaders project, just like the World Economic Forum in Europe. And a lot of the people that they've put in, their whole plan is not to care who the president is, not to have this idea of democracy that they're saving. They mean real democracy, not what our founding fathers gave us, which is a constitutional republic. They mean 51% rule over 49%. And worse than that, they, at this point, if you look around, their goal was to get mayors. The end game for global governance, for Agenda 2030, for all of this, is to have regional governments of stakeholders, not to have elections from the people, by the people, for the people, representatives representing us. That's why Washington, D.C. is completely defunct from what it was supposed to be. It is in no way neutral. I mean, no way. But the problem is that it's also not. The whole idea of D.C. was that 10 by 10 piece of land would be neutral, so no state would have more power. The problem is that no state has any power in D.C. It is all run by the supranational organizations, and a lot of them happen to be in D.C. and immune from investigation from American. You know, that's why a lot of the stuff that we want Trump to do, I happen to believe that unless he removes that immunity, which he can do, it's not a treaty. It was called the International Organization Immunity Act of 1945. Just removing that alone would shake out a little bit of our independence and bring it back out. Because as long as these foreign institutions, which I believe Obama's, I don't know what the deal is there, but something is very fishy about Obama's global center in Chicago and what they've been doing. I happen to believe that they interfered in already 5 elections in the EU out of that hub. And I think it's not going to stop. And to see Obama and Carney last week, you know, Carney was the head of the Bank of England. Now he's and a main guy at the Bank of International Settlements. Powell goes to the meetings of Bank of International Settlements and to the European Bank. You know, so what's going on is that we have a a supranational architecture that has just had it with the people. And they just don't want to deal with it. How dare we vote for Donald Trump in a different direction for the future of the world and our country? And we have been punished for it since 2016. And they are not stopping. And basically, Soros took over his father's operation. So that's where we are right now in America. And I think this book really lays out how we got here.
There's just so much to kind of take in. And I think that, one thing that really kind of stood out to me is just looking at the role of World War II and basically as this giant consolidation of wealth and power, and with the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds. It also makes sense too that you think JP Morgan, because there's no Rockefeller Bank, right? Similar to there's no Rothschild Bank, right? It's the Bank of England and the other banks that they run.
Well, Rothschilds have a couple with their names, but Rockefellers don't.
Yeah, okay. I guess I always think of just Bank of England, right? When I think about Rothschilds, right? And so looking at just like how they, I'm sure, just kind of worked together to use this war to basically then kind of launch this new global financial system, because we know that the banking system is where a lot of this control stems. And so then that then gave way to creating the US dollar as the petrodollar, the US dollar as the world reserve currency, which then allows them to, again, use the US as this proxy for global control. And then, and Trump is quite the anomaly, because I think that, Trump in 2016 and the plans that he was laying out, I feel like, I'm not sure where those went, because what I see now is that there's like a different kind of the Silicon Valley cartel that is now really, through Trump, seized incredible amounts of control over our government, looking at Palantir and a lot of that. But that's a whole different story. So anyway,
it's not really. It's not really. I want to make a point about that.
Yeah, please do.
Just 2 weeks ago, they had the Bilderberg meeting in Washington, D.C., and no media covered it. I think you mentioned it. I mentioned it. Maybe 3 other people.
Yeah, I interviewed Dan Dix. Right, he's always on the ground there. Yeah,
he's great. But I have to tell you, that is one of them. So there are tentacles that are very visible that are aligned with the supranational, and we know that Eric Schmidt and Karp and Thiel, they're all regulars at Bilderberg. So they just had their meeting, in DC, and nobody seemed to care and again, are they also immune? It's very unclear. We really need, as American people, to ask for multiple things. The other thing that I think we need to start dealing with is the Trump, what you're talking about in that the first term. He was very much against globalism. I think he was very aware of Soros and what he's done around the world. I think he was very aware of the World Economic Forum and this whole plan. He believes in America, independence, the revolution, the Constitution, Bill of Rights. I think that during the 4 years of the auto pen, of which I believe Washington, D.C. was a full-fledged crime scene, okay? There was nobody, in my opinion, that didn't know in Washington, D.C., what happened in the 2020 election. There was nobody, because they were all in on it, particularly the CIA, FBI, DOJ. And they said that it was because it was an existential threat. The existential threat was that trillions of dollars have been put into building the war machine for World War III and the infrastructure, the global public infrastructure for Agenda 2030. And here comes Trump saying, no, we're not doing any of that. And I think it was the international architecture that freaked out, and they had MI6 and CIA. That's who orchestrated the coup against the duly elected president Donald Trump in 2016 to this day, and it has gone on till this day. During those 4 years, what I believe also happened, if you look at the executive orders that came out of I call it the auto pen mafia, and none of these people were elected, and many of them were very involved in banking. And don't forget, a lot of things that came out of the Jeffrey Epstein files, too. Because what has happened now is that Tulsi Gabbard, who I think is the hero so far, that isn't getting enough attention, I think Tulsi Gabbard and Rubio and Ratcliffe are dismantling what I'm talking about. What they've done so far, I'll tell you 5 things that they've done so far that are dismantling the Dulles Brothers supranational State Department CIA model. What Tulsi Gabbard found, and many other people have and come out about it. During Trump's first term, the CIA was lying to him in the daily public briefings. So they were making up false information to give to Trump while they were going forward, I believe it was exec advisors and overseas and with Iran, with the World War III plan. Okay, so they think they're going to get Trump out. Soros says it right after he's in there. So Tulsi Gabbard has removed the daily public briefing for Donald Trump from the CIA and put it under the DNI under her. Marco Rubio shut down, knowing that USAID is actually the money and the front for the CIA and regime change and laundering and all of that. He shut that down right away. Ratcliffe has done similar things with getting rid of the National Security Council, which was, of course, all of this stuff. This is another thing that we can go back. 1945 and 1947, the National Security Act, which established the CIA and the National Security Council. And then in 1947, they put in that the CIA literally is totally immune, including their bills, their books, their secrets. So they gave them secrecy. And most people know that after his term, Truman, both Eisenhower and Truman commented on, but Truman, especially since he signed it, he said that if he had ever known what the CIA would become, he never would have signed it. And instead, we had rogue agents, I think, from all of these groups, because you can throw in there the Atlantic Council, Bilderberg, World Economic Forum, like things that have come over time, because we know Kissinger recruited Klaus Schwab at Kennedy School at Harvard with CIA money to start the World Economic Forum. So, I mean, a lot of this is just them moving. This is what I think Obama and Carney and Starmer and all these people are doing right now. They're trying to create new institutions so that the old ones that people look at and think, that's about, well, we don't like them anymore. Well, now they have the Obama Center instead of the World Economic Forum. I mean, if you listen to the speech that Carney made and then Obama was saying, and even Soros, the kid, were saying, they're talking about basically reconfiguring the organizations that run the global governance, not ending the global governance. So that's where I think that where Tulsi Gabbard and Rubio and Radcliffe are dismantling that CIA State Department relationship and turning the State Department back into, since it hasn't been working for the United States since the 40s, into something that is more American and America first. But there's a lot of pieces that have to be removed. And I think they're doing it. As for Trump, I think that in the 4 years of the auto pen, much of the global governance that's needed to the technology, technocracy, AI was put in. I mean, I really do believe that the global public infrastructure, look at the people that funded it. We got Larry Fink and BlackRock and Chase, but we also got Bill Gates and Oracle. It's built. It is my belief that the global public infrastructure of full track and trace surveillance of all humans and resources, it's built. It's already functioning, in my opinion. And so what we have now is an American populace that has no idea that they're that far gone and yet are still arguing over race from the 60s. It's just so beyond comprehension what they're doing to the American people, particularly the media. And then if you look into the media, apparently NATO's been working with our media in Hollywood for like 30 years. I didn't even know that. I knew that the CIA and FBI were. I wasn't fully aware that NATO had also been writing screenplays and correcting language. So it's the same model, just now they have the technology to pull it off.
Yeah, that's it. And now we're building the data centers to make sure that the technology has the power to operate. So anyway, Mel, let me go and pull up your website, themelkshow.com. Great website, lots of resources. I always recommend people go to this resource list up here, resources, resource list. This is a great place to go to look at anything you want to learn. It's here. You can find great resources here. Also, your book, which is now under pre-release, so you can pre-order it now, which I encourage people to. I'm in the process of launching a book as well, and I can tell you that your pre-release numbers are really, really important. So people, pre-buying it, which I'm going to go do that as soon as we finish up this interview. I'm going to go pre-order it because pre-ordering is really, really important for getting this book to the masses. And I know you've also got your Substack, you've got your podcast, your show as well, which Rumble, Apple Podcasts, basically everywhere you can find podcasts, except for
Except
probably
for
YouTube. Yes, exactly.
I'm still not there.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's very exciting. But this is, you know, why I'm so happy, because it's number one so far. It's been out on pre-order for a few days. In globalism, this says to me that people are awake and they know something's wrong and to play along anymore. And globalization and politics, exactly what JFK told us. And like I say in the very end of the book, JFK started this fight, and I believe we have the opportunity to finish it, but only if we really know the truth about how we got here, the players, the organizations, the goals, and we confront it as Americans together, united. Because let me tell you something, every operation the CIA has pulled, whether it's the crack epidemic or it's the election nonsense or it's endless wars for profit or any of that, none of our children, our future, our lives, our friends and family that died in wars, none of us matter to the supranational infrastructure that they are desperately trying to keep. And I hope people realize that what you said early in this conversation is the truth. The Great Reset was exactly that for them. And I think they failed, but they only fail if we actually pull the tentacles out. And I think that the three people I mentioned are trying, but if the American people don't get on board and realize what's going on here, and because they are not handing anything to the Democrats after the midterms, they are handing it to people that they own. Globalists. And that is exactly who is going to be. That's why Mark Elias is out there saying we're going to win the House and Senate at the midterms. Well, you know what? It's going to be up to us if they do or don't. But if they do, I assure you, all of those people are on the same page as Obama and Alex Soros said they were this week in Canada, which should, in my opinion, be treasonous or seditious. But if the American people are also too scared, particularly the Trump administration, to call treason and sedition what it is, then who are we anyway?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's when good men do nothing, right? It's all it takes for evil to take over the world. Mel, it's always great speaking to you. Thank you for giving us your time today. Encourage everyone to go pre-order your book, check out your podcast, do all that good stuff. And yeah, it's always wonderful speaking with you. So just take care and keep fighting.
I will. You too, sir. I really appreciate it. And you're the best of the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mel. Take care.